did say that we're taking over the factory, and if necessary, I think that's the approach that the socialists at the time took, and I think it's an admirable one. If necessary, we're going to use what force we have to take over the factory. So that political situation in the factory that I studied was reflected in factories throughout the Russian Empire. The difference being that the way they solved it in Moscow Metal Works was to simply nationalize the factory, in part because it was so crucial to metal, which was crucial to the war aims, so they had to come up with some compromise. But the confrontation between labor and capital by July, August was becoming much more political, much more politically charged, and the differences between the different socialist parties started to come to the fore. So I wanted to talk in the last 10 minutes or so about sort of the rising working class movement and how socialists tried to relate to that revolutionary movement in the factories. And again, even though the Bolsheviks by July, August were a fairly sizable organization of some 20 or 30,000, they were still fairly tiny. That the ascendancy of socialism really is in the last July, August, September, October of 1970. That's when they go from a party of a few tens of thousands to 250,000. And it's precisely because they connect with this radicalization in the factories. That is, they're listening to workers' demands, they're relating to it, they're pushing forward the idea of a Soviet government, no compromise with capital, and so forth. Why did the Mensheviks and the SRs have such dominance both in the factories and in the Soviets? I think we have to address that question very quickly. One is that they were, in some ways, the benefits of their cowardice during the course of the First World War. That is, they participated in economic strikes, but by August of 1914, they no longer participated in political strikes. That was just an area dominated by the Bolsheviks, which meant that their members did not get arrested. So coming into 1917, they were actually a larger organization because they took a position in favor of the war and not organizing against strikes. The second reason is that because workers themselves and also soldiers did not distinguish between political parties up until July, August, when the political issues became much more important. Because most workers, if you ask them, in their studies that have shown this, that if you ask them what their political ideology was, they would say we were socialists, but they didn't distinguish between the liberals. It wasn't because they had strange ideas, it was because the differences between the political parties really had not come to the fore. August, September, the different political strategies come to the fore. The two main issues really are the war and the question of who's going to run Russian society. There's some kind of compromise, which is what the Mensheviks and SRs argued for, or a completely different society that is not based on capitalism. So this is a period when the Bolsheviks become a mass party from 10,000 to 250,000. In Moscow, the main political issue was the August 12th Moscow State Conference, which was essentially an attempt to support the provisional government, give them basically have a hearing in which people could voice their grievances, but essentially to prop up the provisional government. The Bolsheviks agitated for a general strike against it, and it was really the first confrontation, political split between the SRs and the Mensheviks on the one hand, in support of the provisional government, and the Bolsheviks on the other hand. And the Bolsheviks sent in organizers to different factories. For example, in the Moscow Metal Works, there was a guy named Malkov who was sent in specifically to try to help agitate, not only for the strike but for provisional government. The Bolsheviks were the organization trying to win the arguments in the factories. From August until October, every day in every factory, there's political meetings. It's nonstop. Papers are being distributed. People are arguing politics. It's a lively political atmosphere. The Bolsheviks in every corner of the empire are saying we need to win that political argument. We're going to send our best. Moscow Metal Works is the largest metal factory in Moscow. We need to win that factory. We're going to send in Malkov because he's one of our best agitators. He's going to get a job there. We're going to try to win the arguments. The outcome of the August 12th strike vote was a slight majority in favor of it. 400,000 workers went on strike, which was a profound political demonstration of opposition to the provisional government. Nikolai Sukhanov, the Menshevik writer who was at the conference, wrote, "This whole working class army was following the Bolsheviks against its own Soviet." Because, of course, at the time, that was the Soviet in Moscow was still dominated by the Mensheviks and SRs, although a few weeks later that would change. Then a few weeks after that, General Kornilov attempted a military coup. At this time, the right, including the liberals, even though they're not formally part of the right, but they're saying it's time to put the movement. I mean, this is really when we're talking about, people talk about the Civil War starting in 1918. The position I think socialists should take is that starting in August 1917, you're talking about, there's no longer sort of a peaceful transfer of one class to another. It's a civil war, because the right is saying we need to put the boot in. And the liberals are saying the same thing. As Moscow State Conference, the main speaker for the liberals is saying we need to stop this chaos in the army. We need to stop the seizure of land. We need to take control of the fact that this has gone far enough. Basically saying, we're going to put the boot in. Concrete expression of that was the attempted coup by General Kornilov, which was defeated. Not only was it defeated, but the Bolsheviks ended up agitating for the building of Red Guards to defend the revolution. From that period till October, it's virtually non-stop agitation for a Bolshevik government. So, as in the 1905 revolution, the Bolsheviks had an open-door strategy of recruitment. They believed that workers' experience in the school revolution more than compensated for the lack of theoretical knowledge. In fact, there was one very interesting academic study. Not all academic studies are interesting, but there are some. When asked their understanding of the Bolshevik program, many new members simply stated, our program is to fight the bourgeoisie and the rich. Which I think is a pretty good starting point for being a revolutionary. In fact, Lenin countered that to what he rightly accused the SRs and Mensheviks adopting a program of compromise with the bourgeoisie. So that is, the extreme left, the program is pretty simple. No middle ground, the factories are ours, the fields are ours, we're going to take them over. So the Second Congress of Soviets voted to take power on October 25th, with the minority of Mensheviks and SRs storming out. The Bolsheviks fought for and won the political arguments that were taking place in the factories, in the barracks, and so forth. Their program for peace, land to the peasants, and all power to the Soviets appealed to the majority of workers and soldiers, and then later also the peasant Congress endorsed those same demands. But the debates in the factories and barracks could only have been won by the Bolsheviks building up credibility. I think that's one of the main lessons for us. They didn't simply arrive on the scene in August 1917. Their credibility and experience of winning arguments in the factories, of agitating in the factories, was something that they won over the previous 15 years.